Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Bruhnke. I am the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. I wish I was sitting where that picture is, which is in the heart, a little bit east of the Sumida Gawa or Sumida River in Tokyo, this little industrial area where I would go when I was living there every summer in May or June, the irises would be out. And it was nestled in this very industrial, crazy place. And as you may know, Tokyo, like many places, is very busy and crazy. And when things get really busy, you just need to go someplace. Even if there's noise around, at least it brings you to a calm place. And so, partially today, that's what this is. It's 60 minutes of hopefully calm, rational, thoughtful sharing of information about what's actually happening so that we can make better and good decisions going forward on trade. Overall, the good news is trade is increasing. And the last year went up another $3 trillion. And so when people talk about global trade potentially not, being impacted, certainly it has not been yet. And the momentum continues to move forward, as Kofi Annan so wisely put. Arguing against globalization is like arguing against the laws of gravity. It's continuing, it's expanding, and the world is getting more and more interconnected. If you've read the book Chip Wars and you look at the semiconductor industry and how that has evolved over decades, you can see how the world just intermingles with each other. And it's just, you can't unmingle it, you can't unwind it. But there are dynamics that are changing it. And so today's purpose and our own ongoing purpose is just to stay in touch with people who know what's going on and be able to tell us more about uh, those changes so that we can adapt to them while we stay calm, while we maintain our family and friend relationships, and while we continue to grow our business. I'd like to start, I think, today with Ulf Schneider. And he's sitting in an airport in Istanbul. He's considering becoming a member of Global Chamber, and he's come in through another member. He's a natural member because he's so global, he's so extraordinary in his background, and I think he brings a really unique perspective to the table. He's sitting in Istanbul, but he's based in Moscow, and he's been working through a lot of CIS countries over time. So I know a lot of the noise right now in the world of trade is centered around the US with Russia ties, of course. But I'd love to start this conversation off with a view from Istanbul, colored through Russia and CIS and all the other experiences, Ulf, that you have, so that we can remember that we as Globies, we bring to the conversation typically different perspectives because we view the world differently. We have more input. It's not always our own country centric. That there are many other things going on in the rest of the world. And sometimes I know as an American, when I lived in Singapore in particular, is like, wow, like there's nothing US here. It's like, it's so refreshing. And Jem knows that because she's in Singapore right now. It's very not US. And so we remember that the world is a big place and full of amazing opportunities. So, Ulf, do you mind taking a few minutes and explaining more about your perspective of what's going on in the trade world right now?
Yes, Dav, thank you very much. I prepared a small presentation, but after all these changes the last couple of days, I'm even not sure I would like to use the presentation. So maybe I do this now without presentation. I'm indeed at the moment at the Istanbul airport. I lived for more than 20 years in Moscow. Originally, I'm from Hamburg in Germany. And actually, when I came now, when I'm just flying back from Berlin to Moscow, via Istanbul, and I had a little bit of look on flight radar, where you see all the flight movements, and it is unbelievable what you see there. what kind of traffic goes through the Istanbul airport. All the traffic between Europe and Russia now has to go through Istanbul airport. And I just come actually from another video conference, which was with the last US ambassador to Soviet Union. And I also checked a little bit the US air traffic that in the past flew over Russia, now has to, for instance, New York, Delhi, New York, Beijing, has to make huge detours. And I just learned that the Russians and the US talk at the moment concretely about lifting this ban of the airspace between Russia and the US. This would change the flight schedule of many airlines dramatically, positively. It may lead also to new direct flights between New York and Moscow. So at least this was the message that I just received from the previous video conference that I had. But I wanted to give you a brief insight for 3 minutes how I currently see the CIS countries and Russia, so mainly the countries of the ex-Soviet Union. And my special focus for 2 minutes will be on Central Asia and the Caucasus. So these are countries like Kazakhstan, like Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, the Caspian region, Georgia, Armenia. You probably heard about the Silk Road, which was many hundred years ago trading from China to Europe through this region, Central Asia. And at the moment, they are trying to rebuild this transport corridor from China through Central Asia, the Caucasus to Europe, which will be a kind of parallel transport corridor to the one that you have from China through Russia to Europe, which is at this moment still a little bit toxic for many firms. And this middle transport corridor that is in the development stage gives Central Asia and the Caucasus, so in particular Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, totally new opportunities. This region is now logistically better connected. It has, in terms of diplomacy, this multi-vector foreign policy, it's called. It has very good relationship with the US. It has good relationship with Russia. It has good relationship with China and with Europe. And this makes Central Asia at this moment, because Russia is still a bit toxic, makes Central Asia, and in particular Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, extremely interesting countries at this moment, with their geographic location, with their political and diplomatic connections in all directions, and with a workforce, in particular in Uzbekistan, that fits perfectly for manufacturing processes. Uzbekistan has a great automotive industry, has 35 million people. It has a great textile and garment industry, so it's also an interesting sourcing country. And I remember the words of an CEO of a large US computer manufacturer, who said, "And the US and the Uzbek people are great for the IT industry." And indeed, I can confirm this. I also see this. I would like to say a couple of words on Russia and then also on Ukraine. It seems to me indeed, but from the US, you see this much closer, that there will be a lot of new economic business deals between Russia and the US. I'm not commenting this politically. I'm just saying what I observe. With the American community in Moscow, I see that there are very concrete proposals developed that will be presented to the Trump administration, or were already presented maybe to the Trump administration, that will lead to a partial lifting of the sanctions. This is at least what it looks like, rather likely. So independently, not commenting on politics, I'm just saying probably US business will again look step by step on Russia. Probably no direct investments that are in the pipeline at this moment. I think this will take at least 3-4 years. But when I look at the fashion industry, when I look at the FMCG industry, I think we will see the next couple of months probably quite some development. For Ukraine, with also about 40 million population, currently much less, because many of them, as you know, either went to the east to Russia or went to Europe, to the west. But for Ukraine, this will probably, the new development, also bring a kind of stability if there is a peace agreement. And what I see is that both European as well as American potential investors are waiting and have a lot of interesting projects in the pipeline at this moment. So maybe I leave it at this moment with this statement. I think I already misused a little bit the time regime. I apologize for that, and certainly ready for questions that come up later.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ulf. Fantastic perspective. Let's go to Francisco Gomez, who at Factum Global has his fingers on the entire world. And in fact, Francisco, I recognize that you and Jeff were the ones that introduced us to Ulf. So thank you for that introduction. What are some of your perspectives? What are you seeing out there, and what should we be thinking about right now?
Thanks, Doug. And yeah, it's a pleasure to introduce Ulf. I hope that you all enjoy his presentation. He has this very unique view on what's happening, particularly in that part of the world that I really appreciate. And every time I talk to him, I get a perspective that is different from what I'm hearing from the majority of other places. So definitely very glad, Ulf, that you were able to be here with us. Doug, I think that it's important to say that trade has always been a dynamic force in the global economy. And so the types of things that we're facing today, although are difficult for people to sort of grasp and keep up with, are not new. However, obviously today businesses are facing a new level of complexity, I think. And we have this whole notion of tariffs, shifting alliances, and evolving policies that are truly reshaping how companies operate across borders. So I wanted to highlight a few things that I believe particularly businesses are going to be challenged with. Obviously, the unpredictability of tariff policies. We know what's going on in the US and China, about trade wars. But it goes way beyond that. And of course, we know that when a lot of these things are being put on the table, there are many other things that are being negotiated behind the scenes that we have no knowledge of and that have very little visibility until they actually come forward. And it's just, sort of the game of politics and geopolitics that we all are impacted by. So we see regional trade barriers. We're starting to see digital taxes in the European Union. So there's going to be a lot of that happening. And it causes supply chain disruptions, of course. So things are not going to be the same. That doesn't mean that business is better or worse. I actually think that we will see increased activity because of new regional blocks trying to understand how they can solidify their relationships and their alliances and become alternatives for businesses that are trying to conduct operations or businesses in certain parts of the world where perhaps direct involvement is no longer an option. So I think regionalization is going to be big. We talked about globalization. I think now when we think about international trade, we need to be looking at the regions and what they're doing and how they're going to sort of play with each other. We know that there are talks between Mercosur and Europe to figure out how to build bridges as well. And if some of those trade agreements come to fruition, it's going to create a whole world of opportunities for companies to look at these new routes and do business between them. And then a third component I think is very important is this role of technology and digital trade in navigating this uncertainty. And obviously, companies that are investing in technology and that are embracing those types of things have an edge compared to those that that are not. So I think a few key messages. First, that diversification is no longer optional, right? In working with clients over the last few years, everyone talks about risk, but they talk about the risk of doing something. And for years, we've talked about the risk of inaction, right? What is worse? Is the risk that you're taking because you're entering a new market or you're trying to expand, or the fact that you're doing nothing because you're afraid of what's going to happen? And so diversification was always looked as a strategy for growth, a step that you would take once you were ready. I think that no longer is an option, and the risk is actually on not having enough diversification on the things that you're trying to do. Over reliance on a single market or supplier is truly now the probably higher risk strategy, and businesses really need to rethink how and where they operate. So we're looking at nearshoring to Latin America. This is not new, but everything that's happening is strengthening that quite a bit. Mexico has always sort of been what we think about when we think about, at least in the US, when we think about nearshoring. But there are other countries that are posed to benefit from this, like Costa Rica and Guatemala and Colombia, that are offering, particularly in the services area, opportunities for companies to be nearshore. We're looking at the same kind of situation with Southeast Asia as alternatives to China. And again, it's not that it's new, but they're benefiting from everything that is happening. I'll touch on the Eurasian market a little bit, and I think there is a lot going on in terms of manufacturing, logistics, and many companies are looking at that area as a hub. And obviously trying to figure out how to create digital supply chains that are reducing dependency on those physical borders. So those are some of the key things that are related to diversification. I touched on risk, and I think that today more than ever, risk mitigation and governance must be prioritized. And I think that the uncertainty that we see right now is not going to go away. People keep talking about the new normal, and I don't know what a new normal is, except that there is no new normal. We will continue to see changes. Things are going to come our way. And with that policy uncertainty growing, businesses must take control of where they can by strengthening their governance and their risk management strategies. And again, I'm talking about risk, not only risk of what you do, but the risk of what you don't do. So having clear compliance strategies to adapt to shifting trade policies, leveraging associations and trade organizations for advocacy and insights, and to work with others. I think that in today's world economy, more than ever, we really need to be looking at alliances and partnerships and working with other people, because doing things in isolation is definitely not going to be the answer. And from our perspective, we're helping clients quite a bit with scenario planning and financial hedging to mitigate trade volatility. So what are the different options that companies have? What happens if, right? And trying to predict scenarios. Yeah, we don't have a crystal ball, but we can anticipate that more things are going to come our way that we're not ready for. So how do we try to have a strategy that is nimble and adaptable so that we can react quicker to the things that we do? I touched on technology, and I think that is the game changer. Obviously, and this is something we all talk about at nauseam, I think, companies that embrace AI and automation. And I would say that blockchain for trade transparency will gain a competitive edge. And we're seeing countries like South Korea that is investing close to 50 billion in AI to try to lead the global markets. So this is certainly happening out there. And there are digital trade agreements now that are shaping the future. And we're looking at Indo-Pacific, Africa trade areas. So definitely countries and regions are thinking about this. So despite the challenges, I think there are a lot of opportunities for companies that are willing to adapt. And I think the success will belong to those businesses that embrace that diversification, that enhance their governance practices, and that invest in technology. I think I'll close by saying that if I am sitting at the helm of a company, and I am in terms of my firm, but also with my clients, the question I'm asking them is, are we simply reacting to trade shifts, or are we strategically positioning for long-term global success? I think that's really the question.
Which is tricky because I think the point that you made around the shifting alliances and the dynamics longer term is the issue that we just need to kind of come to grips with those dynamic alliance changes. Do we really know them well enough to be able to make those decisions from a long-term perspective? How do you view that? Do you have in your own mind how people should be, or are we just kind of have to stay in touch with things over the next weeks and months to be able to make some of those decisions?
I think we have to stay in touch with how things are moving. But it goes back to that risk mitigation and diversification and not putting all of your eggs in one basket. That's
Okay.
why I was saying that I don't think that diversification is an option anymore. If you think that you're going to be doing business in one place and that's all you're fixated with, you're taking a very big risk. So how are you thinking about other markets, and how are you thinking about truly hedging that financial exposure is something that companies should be having conversations about, and should be top of mind right now. We know certain trends, Doug, and I think, Ulf spoke about a couple of things in the region. Latin America, is poised to obviously bring a lot of opportunities. They're discussing how to work as a bloc. I mentioned the Mercosur, which is sort of the southern part of South America, in negotiations with the European Union on trade agreements of sorts. So there may be things coming out of that.
Yep.
So there are clear corridors where we're going to see a lot of opportunity. But I think the message is, if your strategy was, I'm going to enter this one market and I'm going to put all my chips in that market, that is a really high risk strategy right now. And I'm not discouraging anyone from entering one market, but I'm encouraging people to think about how to diversify risk, because that should be a number one priority in uncertain times.
I
Could not
mentioned with
agree with that
Ulf.
more. Doug, I'm just curious for 1 second, just to give everybody else perspective, because if I have the question, I'm sure others do as well. So just curious with your expertise, Francisco, because you have a whole lot of it, which is really amazing. Is there a legal portion to your consulting as well? Is it strictly business consulting across multiple jurisdictions? Because well, for our law firm, a lot of our advice is similar that I'll share in a few minutes, but a lot of what you're saying resonates, and I think that's internationally resonates. I'm just curious in terms of the perspective as well, because you're sharing wonderful business perspectives, and I'm curious if the expertise spans on more of a consultant slash economist slash marketing slash like all of the different roles that you guys play, and if you help the SMEs, the little guys as well, because joining the institutions and the other guys is how the little guys get a seat at the table as well. So that helps all sizes of companies. So for anybody on the phone trying to think about your services and when they can utilize them, like me, I want to know that.
And the answer is, if I told you that I know all the answers, that I know everything, I'd be lying. And anyone who tells you that, run away. So I'm speaking from the experience of working with our clients, from trying to stay on top of everything, and because of the very strong relationships that we have with people like you in the legal space, that people in the logistics space, the people that are experts on the things that they do. One of the things I always tell my clients is that we are going to put at their disposal our network of experts and professionals in different disciplines that we're not experts in. So the answer is no, we're not lawyers. We're not accountants. We are not financial experts on M&A deals. We work with all of those professionals on behalf of our clients and bring them to the table because they need to be very well informed. So this is a great question. I would not give legal advice of any sorts. I'm not a lawyer. And it's important to have attorneys that understand this very well. It's important to have accountants and financial people that understand how the different things are changing almost on a daily basis in terms of tax exposure. There are countries, we all know this, and this touches your area, Jen, where doing certain types of business, even if you're not opening an office or hiring a person, could expose you to permanent establishment. And so what does that mean? And so there are so many different aspects of what we do that it's important to know that there are different professionals that are doing different things. So I appreciate your question, and I look forward to hearing your comments from the legal perspective. Ours are very encompassing because we do hear from lawyers and hear from everyone, and we get sort of that vision. But but by no means are we providing those types of advices. We couldn't do that.
Thanks, Jim, for the question. Thanks, Francisco, for the answer. Jim, you'll be next, but before we go, I just like to do a kind of a process check. We're about halfway through today. We do want to finish on time, and so we're going to structure it so that we do. We have 4 more speakers, and so we're not going to have a lot of times for questions today. But please put them in the chat, and we will have time for some, but we're just not going to have a lot of time for discussion. We're talking about global trade. We're talking about the world, and to cover anything in an hour is tough. That's a big topic. So tomorrow we do have another event. It's our monthly exporting, importing, foreign direct investment and trade conversation. How in the world are we doing? It's on the same topic. It's a little bit less specific, and there are no, at this point, scheduled speakers other than I'm going to kick it off and then just throw it out to the floor. So I encourage you in 23 hours to join that Globinar as well, and let's continue the conversation because we're not going to get through it completely today. We are going to get through all of our speakers, though, and Jen Diaz is amazing. She's, as she shows there, board certified international trade attorney and president of Diaz Trade Law. You just went through a company anniversary. Congratulations.
This is going to be our 10th year. It's crazy. Almost 20 years practicing and 10 years at DTLs of my own firm, which is exciting for any of you small business owners. You know what it's like to get through those first few years. So coming up on year 10, it's like, woo.
Wahoo. And so you've got your finger on the pulse of all the things going on. So you're going to bring probably more of a US centric approach, which
solely.
Is what we
yes,
need.
I'm not as fancy as Francisco to be as worldly. If any lawyer ever tells you that they know every law for every country, similar to what Francisco said, run, because they're full of it. It's just not possible. Keeping up with the United States and our 47 federal regulatory agencies is enough to make you scream on a daily basis. And my team itself has been running, keeping in touch with USTR and BIS and CBP and all the various agencies that are coming up with new rules and having to implement the presidential directive on a second by second basis. So what I term this as is trade whiplash, and that's why everything is as is, and it changes by the second, by the minute, by the hour, by the day. Everything that we're looking at is consistently moving and changing. But I'm just going to give you a couple of the most common questions that we are being asked right now. And I'm going to give you resources for more info because, as Francisco said, if you're not following somebody that has the expertise in an area that you need, you're screwed. Plain and simple. You just are. It is what it is because there is so much ever evolving, changing information. And the first question is, how the hell could this happen? How? I don't understand. We have USMCA, we have 20 free trade agreements. How could we have tariffs, period? That's number one. I don't understand it. What is the mechanism for a president to just issue tariffs when we have a free trade agreement in place? Doesn't that free trade agreement protect us? And the fun answer is what I'm showing you on the screen. These are various actions that can take place in addition. So just because we love you and have a free trade agreement in place with you doesn't mean that we can't utilize these tools on top of the FTA. Now, whether or not there's going to be litigation, that's another fun story. We are actively involved in representing almost a couple hundred importers in what we call Section 301 litigation for the China tariff lawsuit. And there are almost 10,000 importers as part of that lawsuit. And we represent only a couple hundred of the 10,000. So that's ongoing. We very much, and I'll share that in a couple slides, expect litigation to ensue. But what's going on right now when it comes to Canada, Mexico, and China is IEEPA. And these are emergency powers. And the rationale is there is an unusual or extraordinary threat to our national security. So what is that threat? Is it the border? Is it drugs? Yes, that's the claim. Do you believe it? Do you not believe it? I don't know. I need a lot of alcohol to start talking about that. The rationale and the politics behind that, that's another story. I'm just here to present facts and what's going on, and then how you feel about it. alcohol and coffee is needed for that. But what happens in terms of what you're doing on a second by second basis, if you're not on Truth Social, if you're not keeping in touch with news, if you don't have favorite law firms you're following, if you're not on top of Federal Register notices, if you're not getting CSMS messages from CBP, plain and simply, you're not part of the table and you're not seeing what's going on, and you can't be part of the discussion, because where are we and where it's going, it changes second by second. February 1st, 3rd, 10th, 27th, March 4th, crazy days. March 12th, another crazy day that's coming up. Are we going to have 25%? Are we not? What tariffs? What does it apply to? What doesn't it apply to? This is what we're doing on a second by second basis. And we have many clients coming to us saying, how the hell does this impact us? Does it impact us? Do we meet an exception? Do we not meet an exception? What's going on here? I have this steel and aluminum. I'm part of this derivative and I have this raw material. Can I shift this function to this country? I'm using these various countries. Which one's screwed? Which one's not screwed? But wait a minute, it looks like I'm trying to come up with something extra creative. Am I screwing the system or not? Here's the deal. Twofold. One is, what applies to you and doesn't apply to you very much has everything to do with what Francisco was saying, which is, do you have your house in order? Do you understand internally what your freaking classifications are? Because if you are an importer and you don't know what an HTS is, you're behind the 8 ball and you're extra special screwed this day and age. You've got to get your house in order. That's minimum. Get your house in order. If you are an importer that goes to your customs broker and says, broker, you do everything for me and I'm going to close my eyes blind, maybe you're very lucky to have somebody like Jermil who's on the line with us, who rocks, who cares about you, who wants to do what's best for you. But Jermil's also going to have a power of attorney subject to terms and conditions. If for any reason, and I'm not saying she's not perfect because she's very close to perfect, but if she does screw up, her limitation of liability is $50 freaking dollars. All the liability goes to you, the importer. So are you going to at least check and validate that everything she's telling you is right? Because does she know your product better than you if you're importing? I hope not. I mean, she's incredibly intelligent, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she is going to know your product and know the raw materials and know the supply chain, because what's happening with these tariffs is crazy, and what's going to happen is going to be crazier, which is the validation of whether or not you're implementing them properly. Because what does the government want, especially US Customs, more than anything else? Money, honey. They are the second largest revenue producing agency behind the IRS. And after all these tariffs, they might become the first. So what's going to happen is, if you don't pay the extra 20% for China, if you don't pay the 25% for steel and aluminum, if you don't pay the extra 25% for Canadian and Mexican imports, and you try to somehow avoid, change the country of origin, have fraudulent documentation in some way, shape, or form, the government has lots of mechanisms to come after you. That's what we expect to see, a whole lot of enforcement coming forward. That's what's happened with 301 as well, when companies are trying to take advantage of potential exceptions. What we're going to see is a lot of people are asking about substantial transformation and country of origin shifts and what country can or can't we go to. Good conversations. What does the US government want? We want you to come here. We want you to manufacture here. Is all of that possible? I don't know. That's a case-by-case basis with what you're actually making. But what are other things to do? And we have a specific 1-hour webinar just talking about drawback, tariff engineering, country of origin changing, first sale, changing your Incoterms, seeking exclusions when they apply, and sometimes they don't apply. New 232 tariffs say exclusions are gone. So by March 12th, enjoy the exclusion that you would have had for your 232. We don't have them going forward for now. Could that change on a second-by-second basis? Absolutely. We don't know. Deferring the payment of your duties via utilizing a foreign trade zone. And if, for example, we have many of our customers, especially in the South Florida market, importing for export. So that's not going to go away. That's going to stay the same in terms of utilizing duty deferral sources. Some people were really scared about their cash flow and their customs bonds and how much they're going to be spending in duties. All things to take care of and to organize while you're organizing now all of those different thoughts and considerations. So as Francisco was saying, play out different models. What's it going to cost? What's it going to save you? What's it going to look like? Because implementing programs like coming up with your own foreign trade zone in your own facility and being your own subzone, is it possible? Yes. Does it cost money? Yes. Does it take time? Yes. Is it going to get set up tomorrow? No. anybody tells you that, that's not happening. All of these things are things to look forward on a forward-looking basis, but if you don't have your supply chain in order, if you haven't looked at your ACE report, you haven't looked at your trade data, if you're not looking at your classifications, your valuation, your countries of origin, your FTAs that you're using, not using. Now there's talk about potential, like the qualifying cars that are going to be temporarily excluded for automobiles entering USMCA, what that's going to look like, what specific classifications are going to be part of that. What are these companies doing? They're lobbying. So if you have wonderful lobbying arms and associations that you're a part of that are in Washington and getting the ear of Congress/President, phenomenal. It's a wonderful thing, but not everybody has millions of dollars to perform those wonderful lobbying functions. So getting involved in those organizations, amazing. Things that I don't want you to do, I mean, praying is good, but ignoring is bad. Letting non-lawyers perform legal functions, relying only on a broker and closing your eyes and hiding in the sand. I don't want you to do that. I want you to be engaged. If you're an importer, double invoicing, and I'll say this like 2 times, Doug, because it bears repeating, because we have, unfortunately, clients and referrals and wonderful people that are going to jail and or having criminal convictions as a result of this. If a supplier tells you it is okay to have 2 sets of invoices and a second invoice with a value lower for customs purposes, the answer isn't just no, it's hell no, and it needs to be hell no, because the criminal consequences of that are horrific. Don't let that happen to you. This is the 1-hour webinar with all of those different tools talked about in a whole lot more detail. We have Bloomberg articles galore. For importers, I beg of you, what is your reasonable care obligation? If you don't know about forced labor, you don't know about anti-dumping and countervailing duties, if you haven't started mapping your supply chain, if you don't know your classifications, if you don't know what an assist is, all essential questions. If you can't get me an entry packet within less than 24 hours, that's a separate violation. There are just so many housekeeping items that you have to have in order these days in order to implement and plan, because now you also have to think about your 5-year statute of limitations. If customs can go back 5 years to make your life miserable, that's not a plan, you know. So lots of trainings coming up. There are always trainings, and more trainings, and lots of ways to keep in touch. So I put my LinkedIn in the chat box too, and I am positive there are thousands of questions when it comes to all of these topics, but in the interest of time, we'll keep moving.
Thanks, Jen. It's a lot to digest there. Hopefully we'll have time at the end for questions. Dr. Raphael K. Partaszynski. I butchered that, I'm sure, even though I'm Polish.
It's quite close, so thank you.
You have you did some amazing international work, and we'd love to hear your perspective as well. What would you like to share today?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a great meeting. It's great to hear those different perspectives. What I would like to add to the mix, I think I will be going closer to kind of like what Francisco was saying. I will give you like a perspective of an entrepreneur who kind of I'm originally from Poland. I moved to US 6 years ago. And my original business is medical business from Poland, but I built with my dad's since 2000. In 2007 we founded that, and I knew from the start that our expansion will go global. We will go global. We'll go outside of Poland. Poland is not enough for me. And what's like how it fits to all of what we are talking about. I actually liked and I wanted to say the same, like what Francisco said, that, I remember it was after my MBA when I was doing some classes on Harvard. We were talking about new normal 2.0, and like Francisco mentions, like new normal, I don't know which number nowadays. So, from perspective of an entrepreneur, you need to be, you always need to be ready. You need to diversify, right? It's as it was once mentioned, it's not optional, right? I don't think it was ever optional, right? Sometimes, maybe, like it depends, like from what country you are, like what kind of perspective you are. I also traveled the world and kind of have distributors and partnerships all over the world, and I think that depending on what country you are, like what kind of regulations you are used to, what kind of ecosystem, what kind of, I would say, what kind of like is around you, what kind of what support you are getting, what kind of what is difficult for you, what is easy for you. It depends how your business is shaped. I think like that all businesses are shaped during this kind of difficult situation, but we are tossed into new normals, and this is. I don't know if you read book Anti-Fragility, but by Nassim Taleb. That's a very good book, and I think it is not like evolution is not about like Darwinism, right? It's not about the strongest will survive. It's about those that adapt quickly will survive. So this kind of like what was when I kind of I have PhD, but PhD in computer science, and my all education is more in business. I was fascinated by by business, by entrepreneurship. So I kind of knew very, very shortly that you have to be adaptable. And going back to my point on your ecosystem where you are in, I'm from Poland, and I don't know if you know, but for me, for example, as a Polish entrepreneur, Polish small entrepreneur, the system back in Poland was not very great, right? I was less afraid kind of my competition. I was always, I only wonder what the IRS will figure out, what new ways, IRS will figure out to kind of mess with us, right? What kind of hurdles will be tossed in front of us by government, right? So I was kind of used to this, to kind of have to hustle, right? Have to be prepared for different situations. And I remember we also what kind of like it was mentioned, like, do we want to go global? Yes, we want to go global when it comes to our sales, but what happens with our supply chain, right? And I've been through this story of importing from China. We were importing material from China, and when it arrived in Poland, right, and I had to pay all the taxes, all the duties, and remember, in Europe we have VAT. In US we don't know such a thing, but as VAT, and VAT in Poland was always much more bigger than in Germany, for example. So once those materials arrived, we had to pay like double the price of the goods in taxes and in tariffs. So it kind of like pushed us to be more localized, to look for partners and suppliers in Poland, suppliers in Europe. So this is kind of like natural. I think that maybe now, like if looking after years, looking from US perspective, right, when suddenly our goods, what we are importing here, are more expensive. I was used to that. I was used to that in Poland because we also always had like a more expensive goods just because of those of VAT, right? So when they are small, right, and okay, VAT is kind of reasonable, but you have to pay it at the beginning. So what I would like to emphasize is, as businessmen, right, small or big, right, if you are big, you can have it easier, right, because you can afford all the lawyers, all the legal firms, all the consultants. If you are small, right, then you kind of have to figure out by yourself, but it's more difficult. But that makes you more resilient. So even if the situation is very difficult, I welcome challenge, right? As entrepreneur, I welcome challenge, bigger or smaller, right? It only will make me stronger at the end, right? So that's always my perspective, right? Because I was born in this kind of, I was born in communist time, right? I was fortunate for Poland to get out of communism in 1989. So I'm able now to live in US, right? If all the things in 90s wouldn't happen, I wouldn't be here, right? I would be under communist oath, for not being able to live normal free life, right? So what I would like to emphasize that, okay, these are difficult times, but they will make us stronger, and we have to remember that those tariffs are for everyone, right? Not only for one company or the other company. We just have to figure it out. And if we have this kind of attitude to this, right, we have to figure out how to be successful in the end. If we are strong, we'll be only stronger. So look at this from the entrepreneurship perspective. This will just make us stronger. We will just have better supply chains. We'll diversify better, and for the future, we remember always about diversifying our sales and diversifying our supply chains.
No question.
And yeah, so and now, like one of the things I do, I also help companies from mostly from Europe, but also from Asia, to come and kind of soft land in US. And in recent times, I see more kind of like those companies being interested in small companies, startup size, or SMEs, very smaller SMEs. Like if you are a big company, you have hundred thousands on consultants, you can do it like this, right? But if you're a small company, you have to bootstrap. You have to do it gradually. So that's what I'm helping them with, in doing that, right? Not with consultancy, but by creating meaningful connections, local connections in Nevada. So I see like kind of influx of those companies. They want to try it, right? Because it's a logical thing, right? If there is tariff, you want to create a company in the US that will be kind of handling your US matters. And to be honest, like my experience is that you cannot be successful in US without having US address, entity, or whatever. So it hadn't changed. It only changed in a way that maybe now there is like a incentive of like having more business here in terms of like warehousing, maybe manufacturing. But I was doing the same, like for example, with Brazil. When we are selling our products to Brazil has classified our product as a medical product. And if we wanted Anvisa to kind of like certify us, they would have to come to Poland and we had to pay for all that certification. So we just had a deal with our local distributor that we will send you parts and you will assemble them, right, in Brazil, and then it's like Brazilian product, right? So many ways, right? You just have to be creative about that, right? So that's what I would kind of like encourage everyone, like look on the things from, they are not good, they are not bad. They are just things happening out in the world, right? We cannot quantify. We don't know in the long term if they are good or bad, right? We cannot quantify them. We just have to be ready, and as entrepreneurs, just flexible, agile, be anti-fragile, basically. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your time. Raphael, he mentioned he's from Poland. He's in Las Vegas. Previously, Jen Diaz, she's based in southern Florida. She's out of Miami. Francisco is in DC, originally from Colombia. And Ulf, as he mentioned, is living in Moscow, worked in CIS, and he's in the airport in Istanbul. So we've got a really globally minded group of speakers here and in the audience as well. We only have about 10 minutes left, and so sorry that I was not very effective in managing this, so that we're going to definitely get done. But we do have a part 2 tomorrow. If you don't mind joining tomorrow in 22 hours, we'll also have another hour of conversation about this. I welcome you to that. Our next 2 speakers, both are extraordinary in their expertise. They're both based in the U.S. Demetris Evans runs the Evans International Law Firm, and she's based out of Chicago. She's also our Global Chamber Chicago Advisory Board Chair, has been for the last couple of years, and she's amazing in her expertise. And then Alex Martin will finish us up, and there may be time for a comment or two right after that. Demetris is a great example of our international world. A couple days ago, she has a client who has a shipment based in Lomé, Togo, that's been stopped, and she needed help. And the Global Chamber Network has scrambled to be able to help. And fortunately, there's a couple people who have stepped up to be able to help. And so, Demetris, thanks for all that you do. Thanks for using that network to be able to facilitate your clients' success. What would you like to share in the midst of all of this chaos to bring us back down to, as we've had our other speakers do, give us some key gems that we need to be thinking about right now so we can take the right actions?
Thank you, Doug. Everyone has been so amazing. I think Raphael actually brought my anxiety down quite a bit because I was in a panic, but then also seeing your garden, I felt like, okay, it's going to be okay. Taking away some very good things from them that I just want to mention. I think Francisco was talking about having the insight to work with others, right? That's what we do at Global Chamber. That's what it's about. Can we connect our world? So why harm us in that area? It's very strange. I agree with Jen. This is not what we want. What the hell is going on? And also taking from Raphael before I do my presentation, that it's not to the strongest, but it's to those who are adaptable. So I believe that we do have to be adaptable at this time. I am going to share, hopefully I am ready to do that. Let's see.
We've only got a couple minutes.
Okay, and I only have a couple of slides, so I'm going to share here. Let's see.
I see Jen in there.
Okay, all right, this is it. So when I was preparing, just like the other presenters, we were in a different place. And then last night it kind of changed. So I want to talk about first of all, this is affecting everyone, right? So it's now being said, the economists are saying that this is going to affect every US household in the next coming year by at least $1,000. So everything is going to go up. And then when I'm talking to people, they're like, Demetrius, what is this all about? So I think we really have to understand, and I think that our president has done a great job with confusing the American public for sure on what tariffs are, that they're taxes that are imposed upon imported goods, and it's not the companies that are paying, it's not, you know, the countries that are paying, it's us, the people, that will pay when the companies that are importing into the US, they have no choice but to go up on a lot of the goods. And so, you know, I think that this is essential that people understand this. And so we have the economic impact. We have this whole ripple effect. The Tax Foundation estimates that fully implemented tariffs could increase the tax burden by like over $800. We have higher prices for consumers. We have impact on production costs for those who are importing, especially from China, from Mexico, from Canada. And I think Jen did a great job in talking about how does this happen? This happens because we're afraid, right? Where the president, his administration can use IEEPA and say, this is an emergency, right? Which gets us all in an uproar. And so then we're agreeing, but it provides a legal justification, but it also raises questions about the scope of the presidential power that we're seeing right now and the potential for all of these trade disputes and wars, which I, argue that we are already in. So what can we do? What can businesses do? And we've talked about this. And so I don't think it's anything new. I feel like I'm going to add one thing, but there's the supply chain diversification. We're going to have to explore different suppliers, coming onshore, going offshore, deciding, can we get something a little bit less expensive from here or there? We have to look at tariff engineering, investigating ways to modify products that fall under different or lower tariff classifications. And this is going to require detailed understanding of the tariff codes. You're going to have to deal with the lawyers. I don't know. We're going to have to figure out how do we make it so that the prices are lowered so we can have these conversations. I think that foreign trade zones are a great way to go. It's an application. They're really not that difficult to have a foreign trade zone, which will reduce and eliminate some customs duties. These zones can provide significant cost savings for businesses. And then here we go. We're going to have to be agile. We have to improve efficiency. How are we going to do that? We have AI. We have all of these technology upgrades. I saw that just as soon as, it was implemented, the American auto industry, lobbying said, hey, we need an exemption. And Trump right away said, okay, you have a month. So I was like, can everyone do that? Maybe get with lobbying groups groups, other groups that are doing it. It's not going to be easy to do it on your own. And then as a lawyer, I am going back and reviewing contracts. What's in the contracts? Can, instead of paying, the way that we were paying before for business to business, can we negotiate different ways to, just hold off and work with each other so that we're all in this together and we're diversifying the money? So those are some things that I thought about. Look forward to questions.
We're really sorry. We don't have time for questions. So I'm sorry that I mismanaged this meeting, but at least we have an hour tomorrow that we can talk. There's two people, though, I do want to hear from, 30 seconds each, and I'm sorry that it's so reduced. Number one is Alex Martin, who is amazing, and so is Francisco Gomez, if you could have the final word. Alex, what would you like to share? Because transfer pricing, and you're probably very busy right now.
Yeah, definitely. I'll keep it short and sweet. We work with multinational companies. Let's say we've got an international company investing in the U.S. Now, obviously, 25% tariffs have changed the dynamics of profits and pricing. And what we're recommending with some of our clients is that if you can reduce the transfer price of goods coming across, but increase, let's say, service charges, you're going to be in a better customs position. Certainly, there are nuances here, but for every $100 reduction in dutiable value is $25 in savings. So transfer pricing is all about how much tax you pay by country, but if you can lower the transfer price of goods which are dutiable and increase service fees that are not dutiable, you're going to be in a better position from both a tax and customs perspective.
Very good. Thank you. There's nobody better than Alex at that. So please, KBKG is a group that you should know. Francisco, are you still there? What final comments based on some great speakers, some great information? There's about 20 bullet points that I listed out, including diversification and its importance that you kicked off earlier. What final words do you have to say, young man?
Thank you. No, I think everything is said. I think the message here is clear. It's complex. And a shout to you, Doug, for having us here, because the power of connections, the power of people and having these networks is huge. So the Global Chamber is a perfect example of what we need right now in these times of uncertainty. I think as global dynamics continue to shift, the message is businesses really need to adapt quickly to stay ahead. As you know, Doug, at Factum Global, we collaborate with our partners to provide those insights and support needed to make informed decisions. And the idea is, how do we drive sustainable growth across borders? I leave you with that and with what I said earlier. Are we just reacting to all these shifts, or are we proactively setting ourselves up for success? That's truly the question.
There's the 7 stages of grief. I think maybe some of us, certainly I'll speak for myself, I'm going through. All these changes are mind-blowing and disappointing in so many levels. However, it is the reality of what's happening. And so these key points that you kicked off, Francisco, with around the diversification of your business and flexibility and resilience and adaptability that were all brought up here today, that's really essential. And I come back also to why we started Global Chamber, and that is to have a network of people who know what's going on and are professional and are leaders and have seen all sorts of wild and crazy things over the decades and have the stability and the knowledge and the sage level thinking to stay calm and to think, as Francisco, you mentioned, about having your long-term view. You want to be successful. So how are we going to be successful given all of these dynamics? Well, be part of the community. Learn, listen, be calm, adjust to what's happening. Lot are happening. So we need to be kind of digest it and continue to stay in the sage mind to make the right decisions so that, as Francisco talked about, long term, your business is going to be successful. So thank you so much, Francisco, for being the driving force for this meeting. Certainly, we need to have this conversation on an ongoing basis, and tomorrow is another opportunity to do that. Hope you and others can attend that in our monthly call of just kind of assessing where we are, how we can help each other, and how we can move forward to have that long-term and short-term success goal. Thanks, everybody, for joining today.
Thanks, Doug. And if you don't mind me, there is a link for the survey right there. Please take it, because that report will help you all as we understand what's going on in the world.
Is that the global business survey? Is that?
Yes, the global business sentiment survey. So your thoughts truly matter. Please go ahead.
Quick question on that, Francisco and Doug. I'm curious if you guys have thoughts, and maybe this is a great idea, maybe not, but the USTR is actually seeking comments on small businesses, and the SBA Ombudsman wants comments as well as to reciprocal tariffs in our state here. So maybe as a result of that, I don't know when you'll get those survey results in, maybe Doug, Francisco, and myself, we can coordinate, consolidate those results, and actually be a voice to the USTR and provide actual comments on behalf of the businesses within our chamber, because if we as a collective voice can make our voices heard, we're a lot stronger as a result of it. So another impetus to take the damn survey so that we get those results and that we can provide them to the USTR and maybe make an impact as an association as well for the US voice for our associations.
Great idea, Jen. Thank you.
That's fine. Let's follow up on that. Thanks, everybody, for joining. People like Elizabeth Glynn, who's on the firing lines every day doing the same thing, or Ildiko Makran, based in the EU, just trying to figure out how all this is going to settle out, and your expertise is so valued. Thank you for that recent conversation about EU compliance issues. Now we've got another layer of changes going on here around the world. So thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon, maybe tomorrow.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, friends.
Thanks all.